And it looks like we are live. I think we are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to those of you that are joining us. Thank you so much for joining us on this fine, what is afternoon where I live. Nicky, I'm joined today by Nicky Earlham. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nicky. Nicky, you've got two surnames. Do you
Yes.
prefer Dixon or Earlham? Which shall you refer to you as today?
I got married last year, so I was Earlham and now Dixon. So that's
Okay.
hence the confusion. I started my journey with Nutrition Network as an Earlham and then transitioned to a Dixon halfway through. So
Okay,
that
is that
hence
why?
the confusion. Sorry about that.
So, Nicky Dixon, thank
Yes.
you so much for joining us today. It's so lovely to see you and to hear your voice. It's been a while, it's been a couple of months. So, I'm going to just quickly introduce Nicky, and then I really want to hear your voice and hear your story. Nicky is one of our recent certified coach practitioners. And after your area of focus is sports science.
Yes.
That's correct, yes. So after
Yes.
completing a sports science degree, you ended up pursuing a career in technology.
Yeah.
And then you were on the London 2012 technology team, and you've been working as a technology consultant since then. So
Yes.
tell us about that, and then how you moved from how this kind of pieces of the puzzle brought you from
What
there
brought me
to
to
where
this
you are
point?
now.
Yeah,
Mm.
so yes, you're right. I did a sports science degree. I was very, very interested in sport, um, and but couldn't get a job after uni. So kind of fell into IT as a career, and I've loved it. Um, and then finally, after a few years, I got the job working on the London Games, which it didn't actually bring the sports and the technology together, but there was some link. Always very, very interested in sports nutrition. So did the IOC postgraduate course in sports nutrition, um, heavily carb focused. And
Imagine.
even then, having done my degree and then followed this sports nutrition path, even then, it didn't really make sense. I thought, why is the human body so flawed that we rely completely on carbohydrates to do sport, but we can only store a finite amount. What's going on? How did we hunt as early man if we can't store more than 90 minutes worth of fuel? So, but I didn't question. There were lots of very clever people that were telling me the same things. And then I started to work with the IOC as a technology consultant, and I still do that part time today. Um, and then maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I started to become exposed to the low carb world. I started to experiment a little bit. I started to see results. I was experiencing what I now know as metabolic issues brewing, but I didn't actually know that they were brewing. And like a lot of people, wanted to lose a few pounds. So I thought, right, I'll try this, and it worked. My husband said, "Oh, can I try it?" And I thought, "Oh no, it's very dangerous. It's all saturated fat, and you can't eat all those things because I might kill you. It's okay if I kill myself, but I can't kill you."
Wow,
Um,
amazing.
and then I watched the movie Fat Fiction with a few illustrious people, including Prof Notes, and that changed my world. Absolutely changed my world, and have successfully followed low carb ever since. And because I'd watched the movie, I wanted to know more. Found Nutrition Network, did the first course, did the second course, and then here I am, a
On you.
certified coach practitioner.
Amazing. So, okay, so you actually, because I was looking at your bio now, it said that fact fiction was your sort of your moment where you changed course, but
Yeah,
it sounds like you had actually already found low carb and started. You changed your
yeah,
diet first, but I
yes.
love that, not your husband's. Save him.
Yes,
So I'm assuming that's changed now as well, and you're happy. You
yes.
obviously are happy to
Yeah,
share
we've
the
we've
knowledge
both
and share.
transitioned. Yes,
Okay. So what
yeah,
were your own, so it started as a personal journey, which is of course
yes,
for so many of us. And then you realized that it needed to be brought into your career. So how
yes.
have you done that, and what are you doing at the moment?
So at the moment, I'm launching my coaching practice. It's still early days. I'm a person that's a little bit trepidatious about, kind of going into the market with a fanfare. So it's friends and family, a couple of paid clients, and I'm just putting into practice all the wonderful things that we learned on the Coach Practitioner course. So, and I'm kind of establishing my framework, my methods, and refining things, finding out what works, what doesn't work so well. I think critical to one of the key learnings from the course was, I am by nature a problem solver, but in the technology world, there tends to be a few solutions to specific problems, whereas with people, you can't just say, you've got this problem, do this. So that was a real learning point for me on the course. Was, yes, you might have the information, you might have the knowledge, you might be able to solve the problem for yourself, but you've really got to be able to help the person where they are at this moment. And if they don't want to be where you think they should be, then that's up to them. That's their journey, and you just have to help them where they are.
That's such an interesting point that you raised, which is just around kind of the automation approach that we take with technology, and to some extent with the modern food system and kind of diet planning system. We put out a food list and say, off you go.
Exactly.
And then gap. So let's talk about that a little bit, because that's really interesting. Is like, what is your experience of that gap, and what are the better ways to work with patients and clients?
There's two real areas that I'm really passionate about in this, helping people transition to a healthy lifestyle. One is, so my coaching has a 3-phase approach: establish, embed, evolve. So the early days can be quite difficult. Yes, the motivation tends to be high, but I read somewhere a few weeks ago, well, on the course actually, that it takes 2 million times more energy to make a conscious decision than an unconscious decision. And of course, when you change your lifestyle, you're switching from unconscious decisions, or you're trying to conscious decisions all the time. How many grams of carbs can I have? What can I eat? This food? Can I eat that food? How much protein should I have? And as coaches, we're not needed to provide the information, because they can find that anywhere. What we can do as coaches is help them apply the information in their world, in their context. And what I really, really appreciate now is that in a time when you're transitioning through ketosis, where your brain's starved of fuel because it's not yet used to using ketones as fuel, you're asking to people to make more conscious decisions, which is sapping their energy even more. So the early phase of the coaching journey is really hand-holding and supporting through those very challenging times, because you feel rubbish. You've got your keto flu, you've got muscle aches and pains because your electrolytes are out of whack. You're really, really used to going to McDonald's on your way home from work on a Friday because that's your Friday treat, and those are really difficult neural pathways to switch off. And that's where you really need your coach to say, right, let's do this, and what will work for you in this context. Then as we go into the embed phase, you're starting to become fat adapted. The things that were conscious decisions are now becoming more automatic. There's a reduced brain energy load, and actually your brain's becoming better fueled anyway. So you're starting to feel better, and you're starting to not need me so much because you're on a bit of a roll. But there might be, it's my niece's birthday next week, what shall I do? Or I'm going on holiday, what shall I do? How can I deal with the issues? And then the final phase, and one of the most frustrating things for me as a coach, is that you cannot articulate that feeling when your body's in balance, you're fat adapted, you're no longer a victim of your cravings or your urges or your habits. You are your body's in control, your inner wisdom's in control, and it tells you, I'd like to eat now. Oh, I'm full now. Oh, I don't need to think about food for the rest of the day. And so that's the evolved thing. And that's where we start to play around a little bit with fasting and different ideas. And that leads me to the second thing that I'm really, really passionate about. We start this journey with all these numbers, our HbA1c, our blood glucose levels, our ketone levels. I've got my ketone meter here that keeps me on track, and these many grams of carbs, these many grams of protein. But for me, success in a client is when we can ditch all that. It's a bit like learning to ski. Everybody learns to ski with a snowplow. Once you get good at skiing, you never do a snowplow ever again. And my aim for a client is to say, I no longer watch my macros. My appestat is healed. My brain knows when I'm full because my satiety hormones are working, my appetite hormones are working, my homeostasis is set, my body balance is set. And that feeling of eating a meal and saying, I don't want any more, it's not because you're full. It's not because you've eaten so many carbs that your stomach can't hold anymore. It's because your body said, I've had enough nutrients now, you can stop eating. And you go, okay, then that's fine. So that's where my passion is helping people to become self-reliant, but also having given them all the information, getting to a point where they don't need it anymore because their body's in charge.
That's such a beautiful description of the healing journey, is kind of those words you've used around homeostasis and satiety and an actual balanced or sort of normalized appestat. So beautiful, because that really is, it just sums up so well the kind of transition that so many of us see when we move into a more carbohydrate restricted diet. Okay, so for those people that are still running on carbs, carb loading, I mean, I'm thinking of Tim Noakes, and obviously, the sort of our grounding being in the sports science. Our first office when I joined the Sports Foundation was in the Sports Science Institute in the University of Cape Town. And the journey we've kind of gone on collectively, moving away from, certainly what Tim Noakes has been on, moving away from carb loading to where we are now, where people are kind of fasting and doing marathons in a fasted state. And what is your advice from a sort of a sports perspective around people's approaches to bringing in therapeutic carbohydrate restriction into their training and athletic performance?
It's quite a tricky one, because most people who are active in sports, particularly, I mean, my definition of sports science runs from elite athlete to somebody who just wants to go out and do sport, do exercise. Doesn't have to be competitive sport. So if all you want to do is, do a 5K jog, then that's sports science to me. And I want people to be able to be fueled for that activity. So the tricky thing that I've found with clients is that nobody wants a break in training. And actually, when we think about that established phase, that's quite difficult because they're not yet fat adapted. So I tend to advise people to, start slowly, make the change, but don't expect too much of themselves in that early phase, or else they become disillusioned and they think it won't work. Most people that I speak to have this old-fashioned view. I did a talk at a local cycling club, and I honestly felt like I was going to be pelted with rotten tomatoes at one point, because I need carbs, and fat won't support exercise above 55% VO2 max, and And it's breaking down those barriers. And the only way that you can really prove that is for them to do it themselves. So you have to, that's where the persuasion comes in, and the connection with your client, and working with your client to say, work with me here, trust me to know that you need to take a few weeks off to get to that point where you feel happy in your body and you feel strong again. And then you can start training again and notice a difference, because you'll never have that. You know, a lot of cyclists go out, and a key part of their training is to stop at a cafe for a cup of tea and a sticky bun. So there's two things there. One is they think they need the sticky bun to fuel themselves. Two, they quite like to stop and have a cup of tea and a chat and a sticky bun. So there's psychological and physiological elements to it. And again, it goes back to the automatic, you know, the brain, the subconscious, who's driving who here. So that's my advice to anybody who wants to continue in sport, is to just give themselves time to adjust, give themselves time to transition to fat adaptation. Yes, some people can cope with a few carbs, and some people can't. And it's just working with them to refine things. And it's kind of the evolve phase. What's the best macronutrient breakdown for each individual person?
Nicky, it feels so important that there are people in the sports science category doing the work that you're doing. And it's just reminded me of how my partner, when we met, he was a very, very committed, focused endurance cyclist. And he, you know, when he sort of got to know the work that I was doing, he got this panicked look in his eye, and he said, just don't take away my Coca-Cola at the end of my races. And I realized it was like, almost like, never mind the medal. I think that like, it was so embedded in his experience of races that he had that Coke at the end of it, that it was part of his psyche around the race. And it made me realize like what a massive, massive complex system that we're in with sports in particular, and sports sponsorship, and just massive. I mean, I don't even want to get into it's sort of scratching the surface just talking about this. And I know that's not exactly the point of our call today, but just so important, the work that you're doing. So are you managing to bring it into your sports science? Are you merging the two, or are you still quite separate streams? And are you having any in the conversation in science and sports science around
I think if I'm absolutely honest, the sports science degree and the sports nutrition diploma is almost window dressing now. You know, I've done that. I've got the degree. I've studied the subject, and I know the stuff. But actually, what's far more important to the client is what I've learned with Nutrition Network. So they see the qualifications and that gives them a little bit of reassurance that there is something in the background. But actually 95% of what I talk to them about is what I've learned with Nutrition Network. And you know, I remember asking Prof Noakes this question, because we were talking about, you know, the indicators for adopting a low carb diet. And I said, do we really need indicators to adopt a low carb diet? You know, felt very brave asking challenging Prof Noakes. And I said, surely, given that, you know, this is another passion subject for me, this is not so much about sport or insulin resistance or diabetes. If you think, I'm a big believer in living how we're supposed to live, which is pretty impossible in the 21st century. But if we can try and mimic our diet to how our early ancestors evolved, then that's what we should do, because that's how we're supposed to eat. And that kind of ethos is predominant in my coaching with anybody, to say, regardless of the outcomes you want to achieve, this is the healthy way to live. We have chickens at home, and I'm amazed by them. It doesn't matter what season it is. They get up when they want to get up, and they go. And in the winter they go to bed early and they get up later. And in the summer they get up early and they're out later. And they just live with the season, and we don't do that. And we don't eat how we were supposed to live because we're eating ultra processed foods and sugars and carbs. So very
so
long-winded answer to your question, but yes, the sports science is important, but actually what's far more important is eating healthily, whether you're an athlete or not, whether you're taking part in exercise or not. It's about living how we're supposed to live and eating how our bodies would have evolved to process food.
So true. Such insight and wisdom that you're sharing. Thank you. Okay, you mentioned and you brought it in your training that you did with Nutrition Network. Thank you for sharing that. That's, I mean, so amazing that you say that. Tell us a little bit more about, so for those of you that are joining, these are actually lives where we meet our coach practitioners. I think I was meant to say this at the beginning, where we get to meet our practitioners that have done the recent certifications, get to hear about your journey, your practice, and then also for those that might be considering doing it into the future, if you're happy to share a little bit about what your experience was like, what kind of takeouts are from it, what your journey was like, and how you got to that point. So tell us a little bit about your certification and the journey to get there.
Yeah. So I obviously started with the first course. I can't even remember what the first course was, a couple of years ago now. And kind of, you think you know something, and then you go on a course and you think, oh crikey, I don't know anything. And then I'm better do another course so I can learn more. And then the more I learn, the more I realized I didn't know. Until I got as far as I could, and then was offered the opportunity to do the certification course. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I never want to stop learning in this area. I mean, the people that we are exposed to within Nutrition Network are so incredibly knowledgeable and experienced that I just want to do every course there is. The really wonderful thing about the certification course is that you're not in a room on your own doing an online course and watching a video, which I know is logistically difficult to do it any other way on a large scale. But we had our first meeting in February. I think there were 12 or 13 of us from all over the world. I was astonished, from Malaysia to India to Turkey to quite a few people in the States. Absolutely astonished at how well the people who didn't have English as a first language did, because I found it challenging with speaking English. But the experience was out of this world, and we were told that it would be the best thing we'd ever done and the hardest thing we'd ever done. And I thought, it's a 6-month course, how hard could it be? And they were absolutely right. I think you said it. But it was phenomenal. It was really, really phenomenal. But what I hadn't anticipated and wasn't prepared for was how strong we would become as a group, and the collaboration and the networking. So there's a very unusual approach that Nutrition Network took, which is when we submitted our assignments, that we submitted them into a public place where everybody could read them. And I was really uncomfortable with this at first. But of course, it was the way to learn, because we read each other's assignments, we got to understand each other. And then as the course progressed and we did all the lectures, we began to get more confident with each other and to have the guts to put our hands up and ask a question. And so I thoroughly recommend it to anybody who wants to go down this path. It's the experience of a lifetime.
Wow, thank you. That's amazing. What an amazing testimonial. Thank you for saying that. And I think it is a big leap. I mean, that's also something to acknowledge, is that step between kind of watching an online course in your own time and then going into facing where you really are actually engaged and having to step through some kind of a threshold of actually talking and sharing your work publicly. Yes. And with you. not publicly, it's with your classmates and your
Yes,
lecturers,
with
but
my classmates. Yeah.
in a forum where there's kind of a community. So, okay. So a question, what advice would you give for somebody that's starting off on the journey, like that's just found low carb, like you've talked about, and that's kind of figuring it out, or they've watched the one documentary, hopefully not one of the forks over knives types of ones, but one that's a little bit more based and that's brought them into TCR. Where would you go? What would you say you know is the best approach to take? And this is obviously for coaches and for clients.
To somebody starting on their keto journey
Yeah,
or on their
like,
low carb
and
journey.
wanting to kind of find out more and bring it more into their lives.
So there's a couple of things. People learn in different ways, and some people need to be just told to do this and do that. I usually start with clients with giving them the red, amber, green food list and saying, tell me your 10 favorite foods from the green list and tell me any foods on there that you absolutely cannot eat. And then we start to build a picture around that and start to kind of give them some. In the beginning, I think again, going back to this conscious decision making, that the more you take out the decision making, the easier it is on the whole. So if we can, some people like a prescriptive diet plan, some people just like to be told or to be advised, only eat these foods this week, and then we'll catch up again next week. So, without knowing, everybody's different, but that's the kind of I advise a framework that's as straightforward as possible to fit to, and then you take out your decision making. And this is one of the reasons I quite like fasting, and I don't like to introduce it too early because people aren't fat adapted and therefore they start to get hungry. But once they are transitioning into fat adaptation, it takes out the decision making. What shall I have for breakfast? Nothing. I'm not eating till 12. And then, for example, so to anybody just starting, my advice is to limit your carbs to hopefully less than 30 grams a day, increase your protein uptake, increase your fat uptake, keep an eye out on any side effects. So, if you're feeling muscle, I honestly thought there was something seriously wrong with me when I started because my muscles were so painful and tingly. And then I realized I needed more salt and more electrolytes. So it's being preemptive with the issues that they might experience. You might experience this, do this. You might experience that, do that. And then slowly build on that until they're a little bit more comfortable, and then you can start to introduce more things, and they can worry less about specific numbers and start to live a little bit more freely. In terms of people wanting to understand more of why it works and how it works, I thoroughly recommend the Nutrition Network course. Just start with an introductory course, because once you understand why it works, that eating saturated fat is not going to raise your cholesterol, it's not going to give you arterial plaques, it's not going to give you a heart attack. Why eating so few people eat enough salt, why eating more salt is not going to raise your blood pressure, is not going to give you a heart attack. All those kinds of things. The more information, the more understanding you have of those cause and effects, the better, the more likely you are, the more confident you are in the approach.
Amazing. So, I mean, I'm interested in your thoughts on the difference between a coach and a doctor, because a lot of the things we talked about are definitely coaching concepts. Do patients need? I'm thinking back to my years. Where are you based, Nicky?
I'm in the UK.
And so you're in somewhere in the UK, wherever you.
Yeah, I'm Cheshire.
Your practice is online, though. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, up north. So I mean, I'm just thinking back to my years in the NA, sort of trying to get the NHS, this is 20 years ago, to prescribe me metformin at the time, and
Yeah.
just how difficult it was. And I mean, thinking back, sort of probably what I needed was a really knowledgeable coach that could have just talked me through actually how to reverse at that point, which was sort of very low level insulin resistance. Of course, 20 years later, it scaled up significantly, but it was at that juncture where I started to understand what I needed, or understand what was going on metabolically. There wasn't help for me through medicine. And through the NHS, which I understand there is a little bit now. We've got people like Dave Unwin doing things and shaking things up a little bit. But what is the role of coaches, and particularly in the UK? You know, can coaches make a difference, and what can be done to support coaches getting more patients to coaches, actually, out of the medical system is not helping, or that's making them sicker at the moment?
Yeah, my perception for the UK, and there'll be people in Nutrition Network that are more experienced in this than I am, but my perception is it's a big challenge. And there's two problems really. Doctors are firefighting. You know, they are throwing the insulin and the drugs at people that are presenting with insulin resistance symptoms. They are treating the symptoms. They don't have the luxury to treat the cause. I suspect, like most countries, even if they wanted to treat the cause, they wouldn't be allowed to, because that's not the standard advice. I believe that if you present at a doctor, an NHS doctor, and you are seriously overweight, they might refer you to an NHS dietitian who would tell you to eat carbs. The challenge that NHS doctors have is they typically have 10 to 20 minutes per patient. They have no time at all, other than to say, what are your problems and how can I, try this drug to deal with it? So I think it is very difficult in the UK, particularly because of the money. You know, the people in the UK are used to being treated for nothing. So there's an awful lot of people that wouldn't want to come away from the doctor and go and pay for a nutrition coach, especially if the doctor's not allowed to send them to a low carb nutrition coach. So it does need pioneers like Dr. Unwin who can stand up against the system and say, you know, I've seen you. I think you need to go low carb. I don't personally have the time to coach you through that journey, but here is a list of low carb coaches in the UK that can help you. I think that's where we need to get to, but I think I'd like to see it happen soon.
So we've got some work to do in that area. So
yeah, I think that's an area that Nutrition Network can really help with, that creating that, and they are already doing, but creating that network between the sympathetic doctors and the coaches, so we can take, they can do the initial work and we can take away the burden of making it happen.
I think that's a really important point, is how we move to sort of, as a community of practice, community of healthcare providers, away from such heavy medicalization of chronic diseases, and approaches in a more active way. And I mean, something really nice has happened with our Eat Better South Africa programs here locally, where thanks to Dunoon Clinic and some of the amazing doctors in one of our state clinics, they've really embedded the actual coaching program into the state-funded diabetes clinic. So we're seeing some amazing pilots of how, and they've now kind of asked us to expand it and grow it, which is so incredible, because they're seeing the results on the kind of allopathic treatment side of things. So there are little pockets of hope, but I guess the work that we have to do is UK-based doctors and physicians that are listening, we've got to start to find ways to work together with our coaches in ways that are perhaps more cohesive. And that's such a big big area of focus. It's really why we created our coach programs, is because we realized so soon on in the journey of training doctors that it wasn't enough for the change to really happen. It's like the docs have such a as you said, they really are kind of firefighting and have such limited time. So how do we work together better? How do we keep the conversations flowing? I know we're not going to answer these today, but these are really, really important questions. Nicky, is there anything I haven't asked you that you wanted to talk about or share before I read out my announcements the team's given me and wrap.
No, I would just add on the last point that if you go into the average doctor's surgery or A&E, there's an awful lot of people that are there because they have metabolic illness, and they're in that 20-year they're in that 20 to 30-year cycle where it's starting to manifest as symptoms. And if we could, if we could stop people going down that journey in the first place, which, believe me, I have a 15-year-old daughter and I have a challenge with her, let alone, and she's my daughter and she should know better. But anyway, that's a different story. But, we could potentially take away, coaches could potentially take away at least 50% of a doctor's workload, because they're not constantly treating symptoms of metabolic illness. And that's so frustrating to me. But I think that's where we need to be going. And if we can take away 50% of a doctor's workload, that's genuinely seriously ill people that can be treated and get their full attention. And maybe they get 40 minutes appointment. And maybe they get seen on the same day that they need to be seen. So that would be amazing if Nutrition Network, if we can all work together to kind of build that profile and build that way of working. The whole world is in a better place then.
So I'm just imagining what you're saying in actual healthcare systems where there aren't waiting lists, and where there isn't such levels of burnout and lack of hope. And I think that's one of the main reasons why a lot of medical professionals come to Nutrition Network, is because they'd lost hope and they kind of found through this approach that treats patients differently. There is a question that's come in from Louise Benning that I'm going to ask you quickly. She's saying, if I was to be on a prolonged fast of 7 days and I'm non-diabetic, my ketones are 5, is that a problem? That's a question to bring in. Do you want to ask that, or should we leave that to the community to debate?
Yeah, I think in theory no, but it sounds, I'd keep an eye on it. In theory, no. From what I know about fasting, it shouldn't be. But I think 5 days is a lot to, unless you're really into therapeutic fasting for, for example, for cancer prevention or something like that. Then I think it's okay, but I'd keep an eye on it.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Nicky. This has been so lovely just getting to know a bit more about the work you do and the journey that you've been on. For those of you that are listening, we have got, I'm just looking at these amazing things coming up. On the 24th of November, our Black Friday sale starts, which is an opportunity to catch up on your CPD for the year and or get some of the trainings under your belt for the next coach certification, which in February, I believe. So there are a couple of places open on that. And obviously, if you want to talk to one of our certified coaches like Nicky, let us know. I could have asked questions now, but I should have said this at the beginning. Ask her questions, drill her. And yeah, that's kind of what's happening for the next while up until Christmas and our big annual Black Friday sale, which is always one of the busiest times of the year for us. We get very, very inundated with a lot of really, really interesting people that want to do trainings and kind of buy in bulk for certification and then do the trainings in a couple of months. So feel free to join us if you have some trainings to get under your belt still for any of the processes that you're working towards or for the SMHP certification. And thank you so much, Nicky, for sharing your journey with us.
You're very welcome.
Sharing your knowledge with us. It's so lovely to hear your voice and hear more about the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Keep well.
Bye.
Bye.